Hey guys, it's Mr. Wild194, and today we're talking about The Shack by W.M. Paul Young, which is William Paul Young. So, before we start talking about the book, and this might be a multi-part review, first off, I just want to go into the new style of my channel. Now, if you're familiar with the guy here on YouTube named Blows Himself Up Dude, this guy has kind of a radio type thing like I do. This is where I took a lot of inspiration for my channel now, compared to how I used to do my webcam videos, and now I prefer to do it with the headset and the screen and everything. I like doing what I'm doing now. I like the idea of having like a radio show type of thing, much like his show. And I don't know what it is. It's just I like this style better. But I just want to put it to you straightforward. Basically, I'm going to quit reviewing things and giving it a score. I'm going to review things that I think are suitable for people that are Christian. And if it's something like, okay, you have, like, for example, one thing I don't think it really matters whether you watch it or not as a Christian is Star Trek. Star Trek, Star Wars, something like that. If you look at Star Trek back in the day, it's completely clean, of course, because it had to be clean on TV. Now, I don't know about the rest of the shows. I haven't watched anything after the other TV series except for one episode from Next Generation, but everything I've watched so far is from the original TV show. And I've seen the J.J. Abrams film, not Into Darkness that comes out in a week, but the first Star Trek film that J.J. Abrams made has a lot of cursing in it. Quite a bit, actually. And I can see where a Christian that really, really enjoys regular Star Trek would be offended by that. So, I'm going to put that in my reviews. But like I said, I'm still going to review the new J.J. Abrams film. But I will also point out that that's mainly a thing. And basically, I'm doing Christian reviews. Since I'm a mainstream Christian now, not a mainstream, I don't like to call it mainstream Christianity. There's no such thing. There's either Christian or there's not. Just in general, I've really kind of tried to figure out my Christianity better. And I feel like I'm judging things in my own way. I don't like to be in that seat, especially after I read this book, The Shack. Well, after I've read it. And I'll explain why while I'm talking about the book and the problems with it and the great things about it. We'll get into all that, but just in general, I don't like to judge things, so I'm not going to give anything a score anymore. And like I said, I'll be reviewing things that I think won't really matter as a Christian. Like, for example, if you're a Christian family, you might like the Marvel superhero films, like Spider-Man, or Amazing Spider-Man, or the Hulk, or the Incredible Hulk, or the Avengers, stuff like that. I'm going to talk about them, whether they're suitable for the children to go see. And I think people might trust my channel after a while. And there will be lengthy videos, I'm just saying, but they won't be entire videos. They'll be definitely broken down into parts. And there's already like 3 minutes of this video review already done. Just me ranting about what I'm doing now. But anyway, enough rambling. The Shack. Now, The Shack is about a man named Mackenzie Allen Phillips. Mackenzie one day is distracted at the pond, or whatever it is, a lake, whatever you prefer to call it, when he is with his kids, and his daughter is kidnapped when he's not paying attention, when he goes out to save one of his kids from being trapped under canoe. The canoe traps one of the kids under it, and they almost drowned, and he gets out there and saves them, because he used to be a lifeguard. Well, his younger daughter, Missy, is kidnapped. And we find out that she has been murdered and possibly, I'm pretty sure it's raped, because it's all little girls. Well, it turns out it's a serial killer named the Little Lady Killer. And of course, like I said, this is a Christian novel. If books I review on here are probably going to be Christian novels, just saying. But I know I sound like I'm making it a hypocritical thing, and most Christians tend, if they talk about stories like this, or like that film, The Grace Card, or Courageous, or anything like that, they say, okay, well, how can you have a Christian film with death in it without the death leading to heaven or hell in the film or book or whatever? This is the perfect example as to what you can do with your imagination and make Christian books and films good. Now, I'm kind of on that line too, by the way. I want to see a Christian film of The Shack, but I want it to be fixed, if you know what I mean. I'll get into that in a little bit. But The Shack overall, basically the guy, Mackenzie, that finds out his daughter's been murdered, when he sees her, he breaks down and everything. All he really finds is the dress. They do not find a body. They have to bury, of course, an empty casket and things like that. And sorry, I keep having to clear my throat. I don't know. When I went to see Iron Man 3 today, which that review will be up today too, when I went to see Iron Man 3, my throat started itching. And, I started coughing and stuff. But anyway, The Shack in general is a very well-written book. Oh, I didn't even finish my synopsis. Basically, once he finishes and, they bury the empty casket and stuff, essentially, when Mac, about 4 years later, and he goes through this thing called the Great Depression, or I'm pretty sure that's what it's called, the Great Sadness, sorry, the Great Depression. I always get the two confused. I'm always confused as to whether one's, the Great Depression, the event, and then the Great Sadness is what it's really called for him. But he goes through depression and everything, of course, from his daughter being murdered and never found. And basically the police found out that it was a little pin of a ladybug. Like a pin, like a little pin of a flag or something that you would get. It's a little pin of a ladybug put on the dress, or found with the dress. And every time that the little lady killer kills someone, or a kid mostly, or a little girl, whatever he ends up killing, he puts an extra dot on the ladybug pin. And that symbolizes the next victim that he has taken. So basically 4 years or 3 years go by, and Mackenzie is at home. His wife, Nan, and her kids are somewhere else. And they're basically trapped in a storm. Well, Mac ends up going out and lying and stuff, and basically goes on his own little trip because he's invited after he busts his tail when he's walking, and he flips on the ice and everything. Basically, he gets a message from someone named Papa, who tells him to go to the shack where they found his dead daughter's dress. What he assumes his dead daughter's dress. Just to come to the shack, which this is not the place Mac owned. This is just a place out in the woods that was completely abandoned. And Mac thinks it's a cruel joke because it's a cruel world, things like that. So he doesn't really want to go. Well, he ends up and he decides, you know what? No one really knows that Nan, and that's Mackenzie's wife, like I said, that Nan calls God Papa. So, and of course, over this time, Mackenzie has lost faith in God. He's just kind of all by himself, really. Just a sad guy in general. It's a really depressing story, by the way. But he ends up and he convinces himself to go and ask his friend Willie, who is narrating the story at the very beginning. Like, he opens up the book saying, this is Willie writing this, and then at the end of the book, there's also Willie making an afterword. But Willie himself is just a mild character in there. This entire book is all about Mackenzie getting to the shack, and then it being the shack just magically restoring itself into this great, beautiful-looking shack. It looks brilliant. The weather looks brilliant around it. But the whole book basically revolves around Mac, his depression, and then the Trinity. Yeah, that's right, I said the Trinity. He meets a black woman who is apparently God, who he calls Papa, so yeah, there's a lot of really weird complication there. For Mac himself, not for the book. Jesus is a Hebrew man who, oddly enough, they talk about him not being handsome, and that's kind of a slap in the face to any Christian that loves Jesus, which is all Christians, hopefully. Mostly. I know that offended a lot of people. A lot of people were offended by that, because they're like, are you calling Jesus ugly? I don't think W.M. Paul Young intended on doing that, but I think he didn't really realize what he was doing when he was putting himself in this situation either. And there are many problems with the book, but we'll get into that in a minute. But anyway, to finish off what I was saying, Mac is invited to the shack. He goes out there and he meets the Trinity. Oh, but anyway, besides Jesus and the black woman who's supposed to be God, he also meets a Asian woman named Sarah Yu, who represents the Holy Spirit. And of course, this is the Trinity. He spends a whole weekend with the Trinity and learns to love, to forgive, things like that. And watching them unfold is just brilliant. However, we will start getting into the problems here. Now, one problem that has constantly been cursed upon W.M. Paul Young, which is William Paul Young, is that his theology is wrong. That the shack... A lot of people, now, if you do remember the Left Behind books changed a lot of people. I mean, they made a lot of people into Christians. The Shack has done the same thing. It is a self-published book that has sold over 18 million copies, I believe. Like, my copy of The Shack says over 10 million copies, but I bought this years ago, like a couple of years ago. However, in his new book, Crossroads, which I also bought that because I'm a huge fan of The Shack, I really like The Shack, even though the theology's wrong. I absolutely loved what Crossroads sounded like, so I bought that too, but it also says in it that it has sold 18 million copies for The Shack. I'm like, dude, that kind of thing, you can't tell me that doesn't have the same case of, oh, well, it's changed a lot of people. And like I said, I looked up, and yeah, a lot of people are saying this book changed all of us. It made us realize that this is God's plan, this is God's will, and stuff like that. These people don't realize they're being taken down a wrong path. I kid you not. One of the problems with the book's theology is saying that, okay, let's say you denied God, right? Like, let's say you just completely don't think he exists, and you say it out loud, you say it to other people, you attack Christians on believing in him, things like that. Let's say you do that, right? According to the way William phrases it, and the way that God himself, which that's another problem too, I'll get into it, according to the way Papa describes that, the way sin works and the way Jesus gave himself up, apparently when Jesus gave himself up, according to this book, not according to me, I'm just telling you how the book describes it. And I know it's not right. I'm a Christian. I'm a Baptist. So I know what I'm talking about. I've been getting into my Bible and stuff lately, too. I'm only 18 years old, but I know what I'm talking about when it comes to books and stuff, especially my own beliefs and my Christianity and my God. I love him. But apparently, when you commit a sin, it's like it never happened on the spot. Like, it's like it never existed. There's constant points where Mackenzie cusses to God in the face. I won't tell you what he said, but he constantly tends to say D-E-A, or D-E-A, oh my gosh, I can't even spell, D-A-M-N. I'm trying not to cuss nowadays, guys, so that's why I'm spelling things out. And I know God can spell too, just saying. I think you'd rather me spell it so people get the idea as to what I'm talking about, rather than me say, the D word, because there's multiple of those. Anyway, but the shack in general is just, the theology's wrong, and I don't like the fact that it says stuff like that. Like, okay, well, if you commit a sin, it never existed. It doesn't count against you. If that's the case, then how do you get into hell in this book? Like, the way the theology is explained for this book, it's like, okay, it does not matter what you do. If you're a Buddhist, if you're a Christian, if you're a Jew, it does not matter, you will get into heaven. You can be an atheist and you'll get into heaven as long as you're a good person. That's exactly what it says throughout the book. There's actually one point where it talks about it doesn't matter what political side you are. And I'm not saying there's either a right one either way you go. I'm not saying that people were not getting into that here. It says that it does not matter which side you go onto, that it does not matter the things you do. As long as you ask for forgiveness, you will be forgiven. You could break every commandment and you're completely fine. Which I don't know if that's true or not. I don't know if you break a commandment if God will forgive you or not. I'm pretty sure he will. I hope he does. Because all of us have broken a commandment at one point or another. But just in general, I'm like, William tends to mess things up. It teaches modalism, for example. And if you don't know what modalism is, it's basically saying that God, when Jesus was hanging on the cross, and this is not my belief, like I said, I'm not a Mormon, I'm a Baptist. I don't know if Mormons believe in this. I'm pretty sure that W.M. Paul Young is a Mormon, because I've watched interviews and he said, thank you for taking up for Mormons. So I'm pretty sure he's a Mormon. And there's many interviews, by the way. You should go watch those to see what I'm talking about. There's plenty of people talking about this book. It's a very, very popular, well-known book. And I even talked about it with my science teacher, my anatomy teacher. But anyway, it basically says in modalism that when Jesus was hanging on the cross, that was really God inside of him. And that God will have the scars that Jesus has. The holes in the hands, but in this book it says it's in the wrist. I don't really know which one it is. I'm pretty sure it's in the hands, in the Baptist belief. But the book says it's in the wrist. I don't really care. A lot of people have differential and debates on that. But anyway, it says that God will also have the scars because he endured the pain for Jesus. That's not the way it works. Pretty sure that's not the way it works. Modalism is wrong. And that's one of the things the Bible tells us it warns us about, is saying, okay, do not fall for things like this, the false gods, the false lies. That's not true. Jesus and God will not both have the scar. It will only be Jesus. But another problem people have had is the fact that, okay, wait, you know what? I have 30 seconds left. I will go ahead and stop this video and I will make another one. So yeah, tune into part 2 and that will come up right now. Next. Thank you.